This video is made possible by the free-to-play action game Crossout. Check out the game through the link in the description below, and you can start with 3 extra weapons or a vehicle cabin just for registering. In the opening days of World War I, Unterseeboots, better known simply as U-boats, proved to be a potent and constant threat to Allied ships, with one U-boat identified as SMU-9 infamously killing nearly 1,500 British sailors in less than an hour by sinking 3 armoured British cruisers on September 22, 1914. That same U-boat would go on to sink over a dozen British ships during its naval career, with targets ranging from small fishing boats caught in open water to the Edgar-class protected cruiser HMS Hawke. The reason for the U-boat's success in the early going of the war was in part due to the fact that when they were submerged, they were undetectable by the technology of the day. Another factor that played into German hands is that the Allies, especially the British, consistently downplayed the danger posed by the submarines, as well as their value in combat. At first, the British naval brass simply refused to acknowledge that U-boats were sinking ships. For example, the aforementioned actions of U-boat SMU-9 were initially attributed to mines. In short, British naval officers had little faith in the potential of submarines and wrote them off as a mere fascination that had no real potential in combat beyond novelty. Thus, they did little at first to try to come up with viable ways to combat them. Things got real, however, when U-boats like SMU-9 began targeting British supply ships, almost bringing the country to its knees when it found itself unable to secure even basic provisions for its citizens and its factories. A solution, it was needed. But how do you take out a target that is capable of essentially disappearing at will? It was quickly noted that one weakness of the U-boat was that it needed to use its periscope to mark its target before attacking. This presented a brief but exploitable window of opportunity to attack the craft in some way. But now the question was, how? Up until the introduction of depth charges in 1916, while mines and large nets were utilized to protect certain areas with some minor effect, the conclusion of the Admiralty Submarine Attack Committee was that the best thing to do was simply for ships to either run away or try to ram the U-boats when the periscope was spotted. Other than the obvious of risking damage to your own vessel, getting close to the thing that's about to shoot you with a usually inaccurate torpedo is not ideal. Also, running away was not exactly an ideal solution. However, it should be noted that with the periscope up, a U-boat couldn't go faster than 6 knots, its torpedoes weren't very accurate, so getting some distance between you and the U-boat was probably the better idea. Now, in the end, these two methods, they weren't totally ineffective, but a better solution really was needed. This all got the wheels turning among the military think tanks, with the result being some rather humorous proposals as to how to solve the U-boat problem, with particular emphasis put on somehow taking out that periscope. After all, without the periscope, the U-boat's only way to target a foe would be to completely surface, making it a relatively easy target for more traditional and accurate weaponry. With proper escorts for the supply ships, this could easily solve the U-boat problem. But the question now was, well, how do you take out that periscope? A suggestion by the British Board of Invention and Research was to train seagulls to fly at the periscopes, which would both make the presence of the periscope more apparent and potentially obscure the vision of the person looking through the periscope long enough in order for a ship to take action against the U-boat. To do this, it was suggested that they feed seagulls in certain regions they wanted protected through periscope-like devices. Next up, there was the suggestion to simply put a type of paint in the water with the hopes that when the periscope lens goes up, it would get covered in this paint and therefore blind the operator. But let's take it back to animals for a second, because a sea lion trainer called Joseph Woodward was hired to look into the possibility of training sea lions to detect U-boats and then hopefully alert the British of their presence. Unfortunately, it isn't known whether this method was effective, though the Royal Society does note that the training of at least some sea lions was performed. We presume, given that this program was not expanded upon beyond trials, that it was not terribly effective or perhaps not practical. As you might imagine, none of these methods went anywhere. But this brings us to the rather absurd method that does seem to have actually been put into practice. In the early days of the war, sailors were put on small patrol boats. These were equipped with the latest and greatest in anti-submarine technology, and that was large hammers and bags. They were thus instructed that if they saw a periscope popping up to the surface, they were to try and get close to it. When they got close enough, one person would put a bag over the periscope and the other person would go at it with the hammer. Exactly how effective this tactic is not clear, but we do know that it was popular enough for at least one senior officer aboard the HMS Exmouth to enlist the help of burly blacksmiths with extra-large hammers to patrol with sailors aboard these smaller boats. With their amazing hammering abilities, both in strength and blow accuracy, presumably it was hoped that they'd do a better job than your average sailor at quickly taking out a periscope. Sadly, as more sophisticated technologies were developed, this tactic became rather obsolete. But never forget that for a brief and glorious time in history, there was a guy who could claim his job was to hunt submarines with a giant hammer, no doubt giving a cry of "For Asgard!" before smiting his foe. Now, if you've been watching this video and enjoying all the crazy ideas that the military comes up with, well, why not try out your own crazy ideas virtually with Crossout? Crossout is an online vehicle action game set in a post-apocalyptic future. Basically, what you do is you construct your own crazy vehicle from the ground up with all sorts of different parts. It's a super fast-paced game with loads of different game modes, and you've got pretty much limitless freedom to create, and what you do with your own vehicle is entirely up to you. You can join us on the battlefield for free using the link in the description below, and going through that link not only helps support this show, but it also gives you a free starter set with 3 extra weapons or a vehicle cabin, all as just a bonus for registering. And thank you to Crossout for sponsoring this video, and as always, thank you for watching.